Hi, I'm Numu. This is the box in the middle of everything, and you should write fanfiction. No, hey, stick with me for a second. Make sure you don't tell them that you think it's a valid form of artistic expression and a good way of getting insight into a writer's psyche and process. Do that and people are going to start filling the comments with, "You're mad," skull emoji, and we're never going to hear the end of it. So please, for the love of all that's black and white in this world, don't turn us into the fanfiction guy. There wouldn't be anything wrong with that. That's exactly right. I didn't lock the door. Now why not give me some credit and put that credit to good use for the sake of myself and all the others? What's the harm in a bit of harmless, well-meaning writing? Yes, I know better than anyone. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. But we know mediocrity is the true enemy, and inspiration and imitation are very far apart. Are they? I think there's something romantic about fanfiction, to feel so strongly about the world of another's creation that you can't help but want to create something in it yourself. But it's in poor taste in sport. It's often in poor taste in sport. My point. Which means it only can be in poor taste in sport. It's up to the artist and the way they handle the templates they adopt. Dahl does have a point, and I'll posit another because it's on that writer to avoid the pitfalls and sins. And if they do, it can lead to compelling and stimulating storytelling for both the reader and the writer. Here, let me explain. What's there to explain? We're the same person. Not to you, Sams. Writing is an architecture project. It's a construction process with an undefined scale. The first things anyone with a pen in hand will define are the tools they've got in the bag. Their characters, their settings, their themes. And putting the right tools together is something some writers do from the jump, refusing to start until all the tasks are identified and they can start working on a final vision. Top-down writing. Or they'll put the tools together as they come across the need for them, and focus their efforts on building and adjusting as the foundation demands. Bottom-up writing. Fanfiction is the adoption of tools. It's liking the hammers and screwdrivers another artist used and putting them to use for a project of your own. It's also the potential adoption of their blueprints. Not if we have some self-respect. But the best way to learn to use a hammer is handling one you know works, understanding how it works, and showing that you know how to swing it down. Deciding to write Dante from the Devil May Cry series shouldn't. It doesn't mean I'm trying to write him better than his canon incarnation. Unless for some reason you explicitly state that, in which case, maybe this video isn't for you. You adopt art to understand it. The same practice is used when learning to draw. Take a picture you like, replicate it as best you can, divine understanding from the translation, and incorporate the things you learn into your own toolbox. Okay, we're doing this. Our example of choice is a bit dicey, though. The sheer strength of Dante's characteristics and the impact he's had on culture, and especially gaming culture, means drawing similarities to Dante can wind up being reductive. Samira is Dante, Ragnar the Blood Edge is Dante, V1 is Dante, and so on. None of them are 1 for 3, much less 1 for 1, but sharp mouth and stylish combat, red coat, demonic tones, and carefree nature, and weapon-swapping show-off are all enough grounds for all of these characters to become Dante, while everything else is the things that differentiate them from Dante. But if you're gonna write anything in the sphere of Devil May Cry, action, anime, weaponry, angels and demons, you've got to know how to write a Dante. Not every story can accommodate a, "this party's getting crazy," but trying to understand how to convey that unique sort of power fantasy and tone is just another tool in your box. The same is especially true for setting. The setting can be the time, place, mythology. It can be the same city the actual major story of the source takes place in, whether past, present, or future. And it's with the setting that the writer has the most room to spread their wings and plan. Or where they have the most room to make something new. Think of all the different wheres, whens, and whys you can set a Pokemon story in. No matter the map you settle on or how much of that map you use, you go into it with a good summation of the things your character might be expected to do, the kinds of Pokemon that can be found in the area, and all the blank space your heart desires. If set in a Pokemon world, there's a solid 7 out of 10 chance that it's going to be the story of some sort of gym challenge. Where does it start? Where is it going? The ease with which obstacles can be injected onto the map gives the author a smorgasbord of diegetic ways to steer their protagonist every which way. This is Exhibit A, the creation of a new story with an old setting as the foundation. Who doesn't love Hoenn? IGN. This will be a gym challenge story starring Jennifer. She didn't get to go on her Pokemon journey at the turn of 10 because her father needed her to help run the Lava Ridge Town Hot Springs, and upon turning 18, her mom relieves her from duty to go travel the region before letting her decide if she wants to inherit the family business. She takes her Houndoom and her Meowth and sets out with stars in her eyes, and wipes out to Flannery for the next week or so straight before deciding to come back to conquer her hometown hero after a little bit of growth. Jennifer travels to Mauville, Fall Arbor, Rustboro, Petalburg, Slatepert, Dewford, back to Mauville, back to Lava Ridge, then Fortree, Lily Cove, Moss Deep, and Sootopolis. It's not too dissimilar to the journey the Hoenn game protagonist goes on. but understanding the setting helps the story write itself. Blind faith in herself didn't help her beat Flannery, but that little bit of travel and broadened horizons, maybe aided by a few pit stops on the routes next to Mauville City, helped her defeat Watson and take her first step to being a proper Pokemon trainer. That success helps her seek out further horizons, slightly more familiar horizons, trekking through Fall Arbor Town and Meteor Falls, and encountering various hiccups and hurdles on the way to Rustboro, where she finally gets to test whether or not she's ready for the journey to pick up its pace. Houndoom and Persian are both less than well equipped for a fight like Roxanne's, even less so than they were to face Flannery, and overcoming her demonstrates growth, change, and a willingness to continue improving, as well as a potential spat of conflict. She went out on this journey to broaden her horizons and see the rest of the region, and by keeping her own most trusted partners on the bench, she could be pulling herself away from her roots. But thankfully, Petalburg is next. Diversity and planning be damned. She needs to rely on and reconnect with her strongest and most reliable Pokemon, and needs to show proof of the growth that's going to earn her the Balance Badge by getting the Knuckle Badge after, probably with either Houndoom or Persian in tow. She sticks the landing on her first arc, and puts a pin in it with a victory against Flannery herself before going on to the second half of her journey, following the footsteps we know and love. Isn't it just wonderful how much changes from a simple shift in where our story starts? Isn't it even better knowing that I didn't have to explain anything to most of you about the region's layout to understand its trajectory perfectly? Helpful map of ours aside. No Little Root Town means no Professor Birch. That means no starter Pokemon, and perhaps no rival either. This enables a more mature, introspective, soul-searching story that follows the tried-and-true gym-battling formula, while letting those gym leaders we adore be shown off in new lights, showing different brackets of their own strength, all under the pen of someone who just really loves the Hoenn region and wants to tell a compelling story on its soil. I love it, frankly. And the question of what comes next stays up in the air, with nothing but the expectation that things are going to get back on track. The story might just end there, but my money's on getting a second season and 3 more badges. Exhibit A is more than just the safest way to do fanfiction. It's also one of the most respectable. Show an understanding of the setting and make that the only tool you take. The more of your own DNA you keep in the story, the less it'll feel like the derogatory kind of fanfiction, and the more willing others will be to read it. But I can think of a quick way to turn that iron foundation into thin ice. Exhibit B. The new story with old characters. Oh, brother. The only people who should be scared to write old characters are the ones who fear they won't do them justice. Right here. Get over myself. But I'm right to be cautious. Let's look at the Dante example again. What sort of story set in the Devil May Cry universe could you write Dante into without him stealing the show? Devil May Cry 4? Debatable, honestly. Shush. Note, for this exercise, it's writing a new story with the inclusion of old characters. You could circumvent a problem like this by writing another DMC story with Dante at the helm, but doing so adds another hurdle for anyone reading your story to jump before they can fully start enjoying themselves. Does Dante feel like Dante? If no, then all other pros of the story are moot. I'm not happy about that fact, but a fact it most certainly is. We as people are attached to comfort, the things we know. It's why we're always so giddy to see things from previous installments return the new ones, because there's credit there. It's more of what we like. And if we stop liking it in the new installment, that installment will be written off. Yeah, no skirting around it. If you write a story with Dante in it, you have to capture his distinct and commandingly cocky voice, display his overwhelming arrogance, capability, and power in the heat of the action. And you have to take this pinnacle of what a protagonist in a DMC story can be, and not turn him into either a prop or a showstopper. And don't make your OC better or cooler than Dante when it comes to fighting demons. It just won't work. Now, if you really have a grasp on Dante's character and how to breathe life into him, you also have a handle on his faults and shortcomings. Another character being better in one of Dante's weak suits doesn't ruin chemistry, it makes them foils. And in this case, it lays a strong groundwork for a story revolving around a character who idolizes Dante, maybe a novice devil hunter, and lets you pursue the payoff of Dante giving his approval, without just writing Dante again with a different colored coat. You have to understand how much of DMC's DNA Dante makes up, and make sure when you're measuring the setting to build your protagonist, you're not injecting Dante into them. What is their motivation, and how does it stack up with Dante's usually reward or family-oriented drive? What is the image our main character has of Dante prior to meeting him, and how does their first interaction betray that? The legend who doesn't live up to their reputation is a trope, but it's one used in a consistent kind of story. The being better than your idols type of narrative. And if you've been paying attention, you'd remember that being better than Dante in a universe like Devil May Cry, especially when trying to convince people to be interested in those characters, is taboo. Some could argue that they still haven't gotten away with it with Nero, but it's the writer's job to make something great with the tools they take in their hands. Yes, this story will have Dante in it, and it'll play a major role. As a story about chasing shadows and your expectations not being met, we'll cast the villain as some Mundus cultist trying to revive him for the glory of being the one who brought about a new era in hell. He's chasing a shadow with no real grasp of how big it is. Dante's pursuing a ghost of his past. And our protagonist, Abe, is pursuing Dante and greatness in the likeness of his hero. The cultist gets betrayed because Mundus is a prick. Abe gets betrayed by Dante opting to almost entirely shut him out and object to his being there instead of teaming up and showing him how to be like him. And Dante gets betrayed by the threat the revitalized and revived Mundus winds up being after all this time. The cultist becomes a monster, and his dreams come true, just not in the way he wanted. Abe finds a new dream, but keeps his ideals straight and that desire to hunt devils burning bright in his heart. And Dante, with his expectations of the threat his target posed completely unsatisfied, finally gets to cut loose, be himself, realize this isn't another Urizen situation, and the sideshow has-been Demon King might still be too much for his tag-along, but so long as he's here, the world and Abe aren't in any danger, and he has no reason not to push Abe along to find his style of hunting instead of pushing him away for his own safety. Dante from Devil May Cry is a standoffish solo act, hearkening to his portrayal in DMC 3 and 5 and his treatment and dismissal of Lady and Nero because of his fixation on Virgil and their rivalry, and made more intense and severe with added maturity, stakes, and worry by making the mark Mundus instead. But transitioning into a proper mentor figure and showing us, the reader, and Abe, his admirer, that there is something to admire in him, but he and we should be more focused on the New Blood's accomplishments since Dante's eventual embarrassment and dispatching of Mundus won't be impressive in the slightest. It's not a bad way of retaining the credibility of the character, and showing that we know what makes Dante so loved and great. It's well and fine to capture the essence of the character and visualize how it ages and marinates over however much time, but if we're placing him in a story where he's older, we should always find room somewhere to show our readers that Dante we know and love. Looking at old Joseph from Stardust Crusaders is a good reference for this sort of development of a character. Placing old characters in a new story is a much more dangerous act, since readers generally absorb more information about, develop a better understanding of, and attach themselves more to characters and stories than the settings those stories take place in. We can't relate to the struggles and emotions of a city. We have much more intimacy with characters, and that higher intimacy means we hold portrayals of them to higher standards. No matter what you do with Peter Parker as a character, you have to make sure he feels like Peter Parker, and that if he doesn't, it's for a reason that's clear, compelling, and doesn't push a potential audience away. Exhibit C is either the easiest or the hardest depending on who you are. We've discussed the potential of making fanfiction while adopting a pre-established setting. We've talked about the possibilities of writing new stories using pre-established characters. But so long as you have a world in mind, you can usually manage to write a story with everything being new. Stick with Spider-Man, I think we have something there. You can't write a Spider-Man story without a Spider-Man, his rogues, Jameson, and or potentially some of the Avengers. Well, it's not called The Amazing Peter Parker. You're right. And so is Sam's, for once. Partially. All the other bits and pieces can stay and wait, but you can't write a Spider-Man story without a Spider-Man. So it'll be our own Spider-Man. Well, we have plenty of playing cards, but I'll remind you that we're the only people here. So just blackjack will have to suffice. With the specifics stripped away, I have a checklist to satisfy. Who's my Spider-Man? Where does this take place? Who are my rogues? What's the domestic side of the conflict? And how does their great power and responsibility talk go? I don't need to make a gallery, but having a few throwaway villains will make the setting feel more alive and give a sense of scale to the more major antagonists Spider-Man has to contend with. Even with a completely new cast of characters in a completely new setting, we have a tool everyone's familiar with. And before they're going to care about anything else, we need to prove that we know how to turn that screwdriver. Do we understand what makes a good Spider-Man story? One singular hurdle, and if we satisfy that, then the world is our oyster. Do we understand when we try to write a Spider-Man story, we're writing about a community, about a small-town hero doing their best to do great things in spite of past tragedy, that they have to be relatable, human, and embody the spirit necessary for the people they help every day to want to come together and help and support them. Spider-Man is a public figure. He's not a reclusive, nigh mythological Batman. He's not a monolithic beacon of power and virtue like Superman. You could run into Spider-Man sitting at a bar in a diner eating a burger and talk to them about the baseball game from last night. They'll pose for a selfie, they'll give you directions, and when bad things start happening, they'll prioritize the safety of that community over defeating the villain. And it doesn't hurt to keep your focus on all of that while you decide just how badly Spider-Man restrains themselves around their own rogues. That's the other thing you have to grasp. What's your Spider-Man's balance between quips and neutralization, and brutality? Almost as important as with great power comes great responsibility is something being wrong when Spider-Man stops talking. It's knowing all of that and putting that knowledge to good use to write an interesting story that's your own, but faithful to the spirit of whatever you're drawing on. The price of a reader's faith when it comes to fanfiction is handling the things they love with love, respect, and nuance. It's proving that you understand the layers of the source material enough to be respected and heard out. It's knowing that Jennifer's landlocked and doesn't have a prayer of getting any further in her journey after the 5th badge without a water type of her own. It's having a sudden, impactful, narrative trajectory-altering fight against her uncertain father under Cycling Road, as perhaps the most impactful location in the first half of Hoenn to most of our readers. It's letting all the fancy devil weapons stay with Dante, and finding another way to have Abe deep in his bag and develop his skills. It's proving to us that you know how to channel all the things that can disenchant someone to Dante, and how to re-enchant them once you give his stride back. It's proving your own flavor of what it means to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, with all the scoops and toppings you desire. And it's looking ahead, keeping your stairs shifted down to the foundation you're walking on, and minding the potholes. When you write fanfiction, you remember that you do so from a place of love and desire to explore and express yourself with something familiar in your hands. Draw your favorite artists' heads 1,000 times. Make use of the stylistic skills you adopt and keep striving to make the art your own regardless of what you take with you. And never, ever let yourself be drawn on by thoughts of what should be. Let the stories that have been written stay as they are, and make your own the best that you can. And it's hard when you're putting a story together from scratch, so there's no shame in writing fanfiction while you're building up your skills.